Dana, you were talking a little bit about Mexico, which of course is near and dear to us here in southern Arizona. In the past 15 years, there have been 180, almost 200 journalists killed in Mexico. And you talked about those imprisoned. This goes way beyond that. What are some of the solutions? What are some of the plans that you're looking at to reach out to these journalists?
Well, actually, that was a question of mine that I posed to your faculty, and a couple of them came up with some great ideas, which is to have students look at the exiled, the self-exiled journalists who are either in the United States or elsewhere, and profile them. And also, not just profile them personally, although those are always really great stories, but dig into what they were reporting on and see whether from here you can advance that reporting at all. And I think you can. Plus you've got Spanish speakers, you've got translators that can help, and you have citizen journalists in Mexico who would obviously be willing to help, and you have reporters who are really kind of underground in Mexico who would be willing to help. So I think it's a great idea. And, who knows where it would go, snowballing into, something bigger. Dave was talking about the idea of, bringing exiled journalists here once a year. I just think we've kind of given up. I mean, I know you haven't, but in a way the press has given up on the Mexico story because they feel like, oh, we've told that, we've told that, we've told that. Well, yes and no. And especially among students, I think getting them excited about being able to do the reporting. That's what I find students are so thrilled about and energized about, and you don't know where that's going to lead them in their career.
Right here in Arizona, and I know a lot of you younger folks don't remember this, but back in the 1970s, Don Bowles was killed by a car bomb for investigating mafia, I guess, for lack of a better term. He was killed, and he was working on some real important stories, and journalists from all over the country came together to finish his work. I remember I was just a little girl then, but I volunteered to go up there and file and do whatever I could do. That experience changed my life as a journalist. And I would encourage any of the younger people to look at that. Look at the stories that started but haven't been finished. What do you see as a key element that makes a really good journalist this time? I mean, what is it out there that these young people need?
That is so basic, and I said this in the classes that I was visiting, and I felt kind of silly saying it because it's so basic, but if I have a simple list of the top 3 things, the very first one would be the art of listening, to really listen, which means put away the devices, pay attention, and to take somebody for who they are, to leave your stereotypes behind, leave your prejudices behind, and then to almost acculturate into their culture, whoever they are, a policeman, janitor, a homeless person, a Mexican, not drug lord, I don't want anybody to get that close, but a Mexican journalist.
I have.
I'm sure. And you'd be surprised at how people like to talk about what they do. And I find students today, they're so reticent to even phone somebody because they'd rather they'd rather email them. So I make the students in my class, you cannot get through my class without actually interviewing people in person. And if you can't get them in person, okay, you have to talk to them on the phone. And it just is that hurdle. I mean, and I try to explain as a young reporter how many times I said, why am I doing this job? I really don't want to talk to that person. They're going to say no, I'm going to feel stupid, I don't really know what I'm doing. And then when you did it and it worked out, you said, well, why did I wait so long? So everyone in the world is bluffing. If you're a journalist, half of what you do is bluff your way through. You have people think you know more than you know, You have to figure out a way to be okay with bluffing through that. And that has a great power to it, and you get many more answers than you think you would.
And sometimes stupid questions are the best questions, aren't
Exactly.
they? I think we may have some questions for Dana. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, a little change of plans. What we're going to do is just raise your hand if you have a question. I'll come over Phil Donahue style.
He's got the hair for it.
Are you saying that broadcast here? Facebook.
Dana, so following up on your work at the Walter Reed Hospital, we know that, and also our colleagues in Phoenix that did terrific work on the VA hospital in Phoenix. But we know that many Veteran Administration hospitals are still have deplorable conditions for veterans. I just thought of an idea that, well, one thing is it time to do a follow-up and see how conditions are at Walter Reed. But second, maybe as journalists, we could, in each locality, each newspaper or each TV station that has investigated people, investigate conditions at each hospital and conditions generally for veterans. Do you think that would be helpful?
Well, I definitely think it would be, you'd find good stories, because Walter Reed is not a veterans hospital, it's an active duty military hospital. But because the public didn't really get that, when they did the reforms, they poured money into both active duty military hospitals and the Veterans Administration. So it's kind of a twofer. And the other thing they did, which I referred to in that emcee follow-up, was because we got flooded with all these tips from other places, the Army sent out, they called a rapid reaction force. Of course they called it that. And they spread out across the country, and they looked at active duty hospitals, and then the Veterans Administration did the same. But of course, it's a huge system. So it is going to have problems. And so I think it is a great idea to look at your local VA. Some VA hospitals are great. But they're great usually because they have a member of Congress who is on the Armed Services or the Veterans Committee, and they can force money to their hospital, and they can force attention to their hospital. If you don't have that, and you might have it in John McCain, but if you don't have it, chances are you're going to get, you're not going to get as much attention. The way that you can, the best way to really get inside a veterans hospital is to get to know through either the veterans outreach groups or the local UVA, that sort of thing. Get to know some veterans or family members of veterans who are in the hospital, and have those family members bring you into the hospital and see for yourself and talk to people. We did Walter Reed without the Army knowing we were there, and so there's no way the Army would have let us into the campus of Walter Reed, which, by the way, is closed now. And all their care is done at the Naval Hospital, which of course drives the Army crazy, but that's how, that's the way it is. And so we did it around their backs, because really they would not, there's no way they would have ever cooperated on that. And I think that's pretty much the way you'd have to do the VA hospitals, is get family members to bring you in, and get veterans groups to be your intermediary to talking to people within the inside. Absolutely, I think it needs to be ongoing. It needs to cover Vietnam vets, who are treated obviously so differently than Iraq and Afghanistan vets, and who are still suffering a lot from that. So I do think it's worth a look, and students can do that. And I think they'd love to do that, actually.
And thank you, Frank. And speaking of the closer look, page 1 editor of the Arizona Republic. Sorry, Star. I'm going to give you guys a call too. What did you want to say, John?
Just Sunday's Republic does have a follow-up to Dennis Wagner's work on the previous VA, and it's the beginning of a 7-part series looking at what's happened since the scandal first started.
So reverberations to this day, good job. Do you guys want to say anything too? Okay,
John, you know, we all look at the great stories you did. How long did it take you to get there, to sort of do that, the two stories? I mean,
Yeah, they were like bookends, very different. And first of all, I have to say it was Anna who had, this is Anna, who had the idea of doing exiled Mexican journalists. So really thank you for that idea, and I hope you all can follow up. The two stories were so different. The CIA secret prisons and counterterrorism stories, which included the renditions and the interrogations that now have been absolutely, well, pretty much condemned by the Senate and others. That took really 2 years of work, and so it was very different. I would pick away at it, I would get a little, I would write a story, and then slowly it dawned on me that there was a whole system to describe. And as I was doing each small part, I added to my understanding of the entire system, and I added sources. It's very hard, as you would imagine, to write about the CIA. It's a secret organization. So that was very hard. The Walter Reed story, which I did with a colleague of mine, Ann Hall, really took 4 months of both of us working full time, and it was a story that is so basic. It was done in such a basic way. There were no, highly developed sources and skills. It was gumshoe work. One source. I had one tip in the beginning, which I almost said, this cannot be true. As we say in the business, too good to check. Yeah. It's just no way. And she gave me one other source, who gave me 2 other sources, who gave me, 3 other sources. And there was a net cast, slowly, because we were doing it behind the back of the Army. We didn't want anybody to go rat us out. And then discovered that you could actually go up onto Walter Reed because of, oddly, because of the HIPAA protection, privacy protection of medically injured people. You could go to the gate, show your license, and they weren't allowed to ask you who are you visiting, because they weren't allowed to know who was in the hospital. So you could actually go up there and tool around. And the first time I went up there, I was so nervous that I had studied this map, that by then I had an inside source. She'd given me a map, and she said, oh, it's no problem. But of course I didn't believe that, so I'd studied this map, memorized every turn, went in there, got totally lost, ended up asking officers in uniform, where's the hospital, which is this gigantic thing, and finally got there and realized later that there were 2 entrances to Walter Reed, and I thought there were only 1, and I had taken the back entrance, so nothing was like I was told. But once I got in, and once Ann came and got in, we realized how easy it was to move around there, and then our big, let's say our big question was, are they going to think we're wives or mothers? And we didn't dress like this. We dressed like, the caregivers up there were dressed. And because we aren't allowed to lie about who we were, and we had done a lot of talking to our lawyers beforehand to say, where's the line? The line was, you could not lie about who you were. So when family members would bring us to roll call in the morning, or bring us into meetings of, 20 to 50 people where some commander was standing up and briefing them about whatever, and we would be kind of hovering behind them in their shadow, if ever there was an officer who looked too curious about the newcomer and we feared that they were about to say, well, who are you? We would leave. So we never had anybody who actually said, so who are you? Or who are you with? And in that way we didn't cross the line.
In this era of instant gratification kind of journalism, where we're expected to turn stories really quickly, what can you say to some of our younger journalists that keeps them inspired during these long, endless almost stories?
Well, the hard part for you all is getting time to do it, because you have such demands on your time. And so even myself as a Metro reporter, I always had I had a 2-track policy. I had one track was the daily news that, you know, kept me in the paper, kept me building sources, kept my editors happy. And then I had the second track, which was a project, or, you know, a project that I thought might turn into something bigger and deeper. And so I really think that's the way to do it. You can't expect your editors to give you this extra time. But, and in fact, my other tactic was, don't even tell an editor about it until you're 3/4 of the way through. You absolutely know you have a story. You might need now a little advice, and you can pitch the editor on the story that you've basically done in your free time. And, you know, so you come to them with a story that's not done, but sounds really good at that point, know a lot about it, and maybe they'll give you now a little extra time, get you off that daily beat, maybe for a couple days to finish it up.
David, any other questions out there for our guests?
From any students at all? Yeah.
They ask all their questions.
Far from a mentor, but I'll get you.
So the project that you did with the students about helping the journalists that are in prison, I think that's really wonderful. And you mentioned about how journalists in Mexico are just killed and they're not even being imprisoned. And I think you said something about doing some work with the UA to try and raise some awareness about that. So I was kind of wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and just like what ideas you have, if any, how to tell those stories, how to tell it in a way that it's, like you said, people have heard about what's going on in Mexico so much. How do we kind of bring energy back into that topic that's still happening and still important?
Well, I've talked to, 4 or 5 people, Bill Schmidt, Celeste, Anna, I'm going to forget who else is in your border project, who have great ideas, who are already doing reporting along the border, Nancy, and who, are the best people to try to figure out how to do a version of this. It doesn't have to be, exactly the same, but the point is, if we partnered, we could put your stuff on this new website, your student stuff. Hopefully that website, we have other partners with other universities, so maybe it gets a little more high profile. One of the great liberating feelings of being a professor is honestly, I don't feel like I have to make my name. I feel, so therefore, when I was a younger reporter and I was competitive even with my colleagues, now I feel like you can call it yours. I just want to partner to multiply our power. And however you guys figure out the best way for you to come up and do something in the realm of press issues in Mexico, fine with me. We can partner on that. And I also think that it ups the chance of fundraising on issues like this. Because when you get, our advantage is we got Washington Post and New York Times reporters. You guys have a ton of New York Times reporters, I've learned here. And you're not just in Washington, you're in, where you are. So I just think that if you put it all together, you make a much more compelling case to a funder who might be interested in free press issues, but doesn't want to do something too tiny. So I'm going to leave it up to you to talk to your professors and figure out how to do this. I do want to say that we have 4,000 more breast uncuffed bracelets to sell.
$10, just $10.
For the non-students, they're $10. For the students, they're $5. And the money all goes to CPJ. So if you have any idea of how to sell these, that is really not my strong suit. And I have to say, we still have these 4,000 after a year. We made a lot more, but I have no idea how to get them sold.
We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Victor?
Talking about the work you do, people that come after you. Me as a minority, I have fear of what can happen to me and my family. What is a piece of advice you give me to overcome this fear and do the kind of work you do without the fear of being prosecuted and the repercussions that happens with my family being
You know, if you're in the United States, the chances of you being prosecuted or even harassed in a violent way are actually really small. I mean, Bowles is an exception. If you're in Mexico, obviously it's a totally different thing. But here in the United States, I know there has been among my colleagues a huge hand-wringing, lots of papers written, lots of angst over jailing reporters. But really, there have not been many reporters at all who have been jailed, and I doubt that there will be. So I'm a person who tends to think, we have it really pretty good here. I mean, there are some crazy people out there. You are putting your name on things, but that also is, it's a double-edged sword. You're also getting known among the community. The consequences for harming a reporter would be greater than they would be than harming someone who's not known. And so I don't know how to reassure you except to have you really look at the history of reporters here who have done really groundbreaking stories that the government hates or local politicians hate. You know, I would say that the cartels are a different story so far in the United States. They've been very logical actors, and they know that if they were to do something bad in the United States, it would bring the wrath of the law enforcement down on them. I do think they are probably the most worrisome, you know, because they still are criminal elements totally motivated by money. But in all other cases, honestly, I really don't think we need to worry.
Probably Hillary Clinton's worrying more.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton's
In
worrying.
jail. But how many here have family in Mexico? Victor, we have a lot of students who have family in Mexico.
Yeah.
That might be a concern for Victor and others. So interesting.
Right, going back and forth and that sort of thing. And then obviously, I mean, again, I think your professors, especially, you know, you have people who worked in Mexico here, they're going to be the best guides to what you should do and what you shouldn't do and what you should worry about and what you shouldn't worry about. And I do know, you know, it is a problem in Mexico, so it's not to be taken, that part of it is not to be taken lightly at all.
Stay low and don't be flamboyant. Stay low and keep your profile low, especially in Mexico.
Okay, another question. Are we authorized 2 questions?
Yes?
First, I saw no mention of the Secretary of War or the Secretary of Defense taking the fall for not having provided the oversight over those 2 general officers. Did anything happen to them?
Yes, indeed. The Secretary of the Army was out, which has, I mean, that is amazing. You know, lots of things happen and no one ever gets fired. He got fired.
One,
Yeah. The Secretary of Defense, who was Bob Gates at the time, he was very upfront and said he was appalled, this would be fixed. He wrote us a personal letter congratulating us on the service that we had done. So I think as a manager at that level, you know, he did everything he could to do the right thing.
I take it you were not too happy with the metadata collection on the National Security Agency. And I would ask the question, have there been follow-on incidents as bad as 9/11? Would the cry be, why didn't we do more? Instead of why didn't we start the system in the first place?
I think there probably would, but I think they would be misplaced. And the reason that I say this is, I looked into, in the book that I did called Top Secret America, which is largely a look at how big the agencies that say they do counterterrorism are, or became, and the contractors that help them do that work. what I discovered, and being the intelligence and then previous to that, the Pentagon reporter, what I really feel like I discovered that's the most valuable to answer your question is that 15 years after 9/11, the US government actually knows how to do a pretty darn good job finding terrorists and stopping them before they do their job. Not all of them, and we're seeing a new brand now. But they also know what doesn't necessarily work, but what they're still going to get money for, so they're not going to say, oh, no, thank you. And bulk collection is one of those things. They're doing it because they can. They have the technology that allows them to do it, because it's kind of a cover your, CYA type of thing. And that goes to the big problem, which is even now, there's never been an honest dialogue between our leaders and the public over terrorism, to the point, no one's willing to say things will happen. We cannot keep our country the way we are, 100% safe all the time without giving up, so many things we are unwilling to give up. And bulk collection was, the agencies in the beginning when they got found out, they said, this is a vital program, it has solved many cases, and the journalists kept saying, like what, like what? And so they started out, 33 cases, tell us what they are. Well, no, this one was that, and this one was that, okay, 12 cases. Well, actually we looked into those too. They got down to one case, and even that was a case that was not solved by bulk collection. It was solved by, it was a guy who cased, he didn't even, he didn't do anything more than case one of the bridges in New York. So after all the criticism, they could not point to anything that had given them any data that led to a terrorist being even followed by the FBI that they hadn't already known about through some other means. And I think, and I say this from talking to people inside, it wastes money and it wastes time, when really there are other things. I'll give you an example of what does work. If you look at the units, if you look at all the people and agencies and units involved in finding Osama bin Laden and killing them, those are the units that overseas really know how to find terrorists, to target them, to get the intelligence quickly, real time, and to kill them. So in that case, it's these analysts at the CIA who've been on the terrorist target for a long time. It's the super secret special forces people, the Navy SEALs, SEAL Team 6 in this case, who know how to go in and do that work. And they've been doing it for 15 years now. So they've really perfected that kind of man-hunting operation. It's not, it's not these big organizations that kind of sweep the landscape and don't provide anything unique.
I think we have time for one more question. Kayla.
So we hear a lot, especially during the security season, about how money drives a lot of things, and you were talking about how journalism is starting to be driven by market forces. So is that anything that we going into the field have power over changing that, or is that something that's out of our control?
Well, as a journalist, as a reporter, I think the most unfair job that we've been given is to figure out the business model. And yet reporters have been asked to try to do that in newsrooms. I'm hoping that there's a melding of people who are business majors and entrepreneurs with business minds who care about journalism or somehow want to work in that field, who are going to figure out the business model, because that's really what I mean by market forces. At the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, out of nowhere, with deep pockets, came in, and he's provided all sorts of money to build some amazing technology that has grown our readership like 100 times bigger than it used to be. overseas and nationally. But they haven't figured out how to make money online yet. You know, the idea of getting it from advertisers has just not been enough. I don't know how to think about that. That's a business, question. But I do think that someone like Jeff Bezos and his organization and his minds, the people who have that business mind, I'm hoping they're going to figure it out. And then when they do, we're going to say, wow, why didn't I think of that? But right now, nobody has figured it out. So I don't know if journalists themselves can really, I don't know if journalists can really help that. We can help by agreeing to work 24/7 while they're trying to figure it out, tweeting, blogging, and reporting. That's hard.
So tough follow-up for you. Do you think the Washington Post is as good as it was when it exposed Watergate, or how has it changed?
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's better than that. Watergate the reporters that did that work, we have reporters doing that kind of work, it just happens that they're not that kind of story. But we have, our investigative team is bigger than it was then. It's actually shrunk from how big it was after Watergate. And when Westward became the investigative editor, there were so many people that wanted to do that, and it was fat time at the Post financially. It was the golden era, so we had a pretty big investigative team. It might have been as big as 15 or 20 people. Now it's like 8 or 9. But we still have one. And now we're using people from other staffs who come in and out and do investigative things, which really is the way it should be, because beat reporters are the people that get the best tips for investigative work. But we're also able to, I think, reach so many more people through the multimedia things that we do. There have been, I'm sure the Arizona Republic people have done the same thing, the kind of video and other things that they've done to bring different kind of readers in, different kind of participants in the news. I think we're absolutely better than we were.
So you're saying journalism can be as powerful now as ever before?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jenna, for sharing your experience, sharing your knowledge, and sharing yourself.